Good afternoon. The Prime Minister has resigned. In a shock announcement only minutes ago, Mr Lange said he'll tender his resignation to the Governor-General. A new leader and deputy leader will be elected by caucus tomorrow. We cross now to the Beehive and our chief parliamentary reporter, Alistair Carthew. Alistair, why do you resign today?
I think he just found it totally intolerable, Mr Douglas's re-election last week. Mr Lange must have looked ahead and said, I can't work like we worked in the past. It's going to be totally intolerable for me to go back into that cabinet room and push my agenda. He put it another way at the press conference, which I've just come from. It's still going on. He said that he had fought against the new right ideas of people like Mr Douglas since he came into politics. That came to a head, of course, last year. Now he feels that David Cagel's budget has debunked the new right, that the social agenda that Mr Lange came into politics to pursue is now in place, and now he feels it's a good time to get out. But the real reason, I feel, is that he could not go into that cabinet room each week and face Mr Douglas across the table.
You said you've just been to the press conference. What was his mood there? How did he seem to you?
He seemed pretty upbeat, actually. His staff and Ruth Dyson from the Labour Party, Tony Timms from the Labour Party, they were all there and they were looking very grim. Mr Lange himself looked very upbeat, quite relaxed and calm. He has taken a lot of advice over the last 2 or 3 days on this, he told us, and obviously he came to this decision probably not easily, but you get the sense that there's a huge burden lifted from David Lange's shoulders. What
about Roger Douglas? Is it a triumph for him, do you think?
Yes, it is a triumph for Roger Douglas in the sense that Mr Douglas has said all along, once he resigned from cabinet, that his sole aim was to get rid of David Lange. And a lot of his supporters, Richard Prebble and a few others, have had that aim ever since. So they have got rid of David Lange. The impact on the government's election chances may or may not be improved by this. Depends on who they elect as a new Prime Minister at the government caucus tomorrow.
So what's the word around the traps? Who's likely to be the next Prime Minister, do you think?
If you're asking me to take a punt at this stage, I would say the government caucus would go for continuity, for stability, and if they go for that, they'll go for Geoffrey Palmer.
So what's the timetable of change from now on?
Well, Mr Lange, in fact, tendered his resignation, I think, tomorrow to the Governor-General, and then they have a government caucus at 10:30, at which they will have to elect a new leader. After that, there is a possibility, I suppose, of a new cabinet being re-elected again, now that Mr Lange is off the scene, and that could see the return of people like Richard Prebble, for example. The
amazing thing, though, Alistair, is that we had no warning of this. Was it a total shock?
It was a total shock. The rumours started circulating here about 10:30. Journalists running around like demented hens, as a former Prime Minister once said. Some wanted to believe it, some didn't. But Mr Lange obviously had kept his counsel on this and taken a lot of advice before he came to this decision. Mr Douglas's re-election was the final straw.
Alistair Carthew, thank you. Alistair Carthew, our chief parliamentary reporter, live from Parliament. Just repeating that, the Prime Minister, David Lange, has stepped down. He'll be tendering his resignation to the Governor-General this afternoon, and the changeover will happen tomorrow. He says he's made the decision after consulting many sources, including medical. David Lange's political career began when he won the South Auckland electorate of Mangere, but his path to politics began with values learned in his early years.
David Lange was born in Mangere, South Auckland, 45 years ago, the eldest of 4 children. An upbringing based on the social teachings of the Methodist Church led David Lange to the law and a legal career defending the poor and disadvantaged. He switched to politics in 1977, winning the Mangere by-election and breathing new life into the Labour Party.
All sorts of people talking about me as being the hope of the Labour Party.
That boast was not an idle one.
I want to thank the New Zealand Labour Party wherever you are, in the small provincials, in the big towns, everywhere. Behind me we have a Prime Minister.
7 years later, David Lange led Labour to power and New Zealand onto the centre stage of world politics. The country's youngest ever Prime Minister confronted the world's most powerful nation. Nuclear warships were banned from New Zealand ports, defiance that effectively ended the ANZUS Treaty. That rift produced one of the highlights of Mr Lange's career, an invitation to go to Oxford University and debate his nuclear policies.
Whether you are snuggling up to the bomb or living in the peaceful shadow of the bomb, New Zealand benefits, sir, and that's the question with which we charge you, and that's the question with which we would like an answer, sir.
And I'm going to give it to you if you hold your breath just for a moment. I can smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
In a country used to stuffy conservatism, Mr. Lange quickly won a reputation for sharp wit, a silver-tongued cocktail that could mix humour with venom.
And if you pay $70 for a shirt, you are showing no judgment, no care for your money. There are shirts available in this country for a third of that, and I have bought them as cheap as $17.
Away from politics, the Prime Minister was a private man. While he worked in Wellington, Naomi Lange and their 3 children remained in Auckland, living in an unpretentious house in the southern suburbs. His big dreams for a better life for New Zealanders carried this country's name to every corner of the globe. At home, the economic and social reforms made by his government will ensure the Lange legacy survives well into the 21st century.
David Lange, who announced his resignation only minutes ago.